All right.
Yeah, thank you.
Go.
Good morning. I hope you had a good start in the day, good conference day yesterday, some orange juice in the morning. My name is Philipp Schöne. Thanks for the introduction. In the next 20 minutes, we will talk a little bit about APIs, not from a technical perspective. So all the tech guys, don't be disappointed. I'm sorry. We will talk a little bit about the drivers for APIs in business, why companies are looking into APIs, what the outcomes could be of using APIs and leveraging APIs as part of your business, the ideas, and how they can be used for driving innovation going forward. When we look into the environment that established businesses have today, we basically see four kinds of areas. And I'm really not talking about greenfield projects. The startups have the freedom to kind of pick and choose what technology they want, where they deploy it, how they deploy it. They have all the freedom. The challenge is with the established business because they have the systems that are shown here, the system of records for quite some time. It's the SAPs, the Oracles, the databases, the regulated systems that exist. And now they are faced with this fluffy thing here, the cloud. I mean, today, when you talk with customers, the cloud is no longer a concern. It's basically accepted that the cloud brings value. Oh, disconnect. Okay, I'm sorry. Let's try to fix that. Seems the power management did some tricky. Okay, so basically the enterprises have now accepted that the cloud is basically no longer a side effect and something they can try to hide and neglect. It's there, and it doesn't matter if it's Office from Microsoft, if it's Salesforce or other services. It's clear that they have to integrate with those services at some point. And then there is a big push from the consumer side, from the marketing department. Even some customers, some enterprises have started having a chief digital officer. So there is a huge push for digital projects, whatever that means in detail, to improve the customer experience. So how do I do that? And what we see is that the enterprises start to build a system of innovation and differentiation, trying to explore, trying to kind of innovate in some way. And usually that's done via private clouds, because if they would do that on premise, it would be pretty complicated to do. So this basically raises a challenge. I mean, you have 4 different worlds. How do you kind of connect them all together? And you need some glue to do that. And what a surprise, that's done via APIs these days. All those systems basically expose APIs, and there is an integration problem to solve. So the big thing is APIs everywhere. Is that the future or today's thing? A little bit. There is 2 perspectives on APIs and what is called API economy. It's the consumer view. So basically, if you step yourself in the shoes of somebody who's trying to interact with a service provider, for example, BMW, one of our customers. BMW has internal services, for sure, like, oh my God, a CRM. Oh, that's really bad. This laptop is giving me a hard time this morning. Okay, here we go. So basically, BMW has obviously existing services like a CRM or an existing backend for their cars. And those systems have obviously interfaces. Some interfaces are outbound facing, like contract information. Are you having a subscription with a BMW service? Some information about yourself. And then there is obviously internal APIs or services which are not exposed to the outside world. And also for the machine side, I mean, there is probably the machine status, the car status. Is it okay? Is it charged? Especially in the electric cases. where's the location of the car. And there is obviously internal information that BMW leverages and that they are not telling you. Probably they are telling you, but they are not giving you the access to the data. And then there is services which they need to use because they can't create it themselves. For example, Google Maps. When you imagine 2 years back, there was no real way to kind of come up with navigation as a service somehow. There was no service available. Google was more or less the only one. That's also one of the reasons why BMW and other German car manufacturers have come together and kind of buy Nokia car technology to build a new service for mapping. Or for example, the Twilio API that allows some value-added services on top of voice or SMS. And this is all baked together into a single customer experience. So you as a consumer, you don't see the different APIs, but it introduces a challenge for the provider of that service, because you don't only have to manage your internal APIs, you also have to manage the partner APIs. You have to do contracts. I can tell you, when we talk about the mapping, I can tell you a funny story. We had one of the customers who started to, in the very early stages, experiment with Google Maps in one of their cars, and they found out, oh, by the request the cars are doing, Google would be able to identify the location of all the cars. They didn't even thought about that from minute one, and it was a big privacy concern, as you can imagine. So, and then there is another perspective. If you start exposing your services to others, try to sell it, it could have a big, big impact on your business. And we have one customer who's working and providing services for enterprises. And this customer is Dun & Bradstreet. They are having a big directory of companies with the taxation numbers, if they have paid their invoices. So it's pretty interesting if you want to do new business, to establish a connection to Dun & Bradstreet and ask them, oh, I have an order from a new client. I would like to see if they are regularly paying their invoices. Are they a trustful enterprise or not? And Dun & Bradstreet is around in the US for like 100 years. They are very established, and you can imagine how that worked in the past. There was a lot of paper somewhere in an archive, and if somebody wanted to know how well Ford or another company was paying their bills, somebody was going down to the archive, trying to search the information, copying it and sending it around. And these days it's different. So Dun & Bradstreet was thinking about how can we leverage that information asset, and they brought up an API, and it's called D&B Direct. And they try to sell that in a direct fashion. So they were saying, sign up for an API access, and it costs you this amount of money, and then you can have access to all the data that we own. That's an interesting model, but then you have to worry about all the customer care, because you have a direct customer relationship with the people who access the APIs. And then they said, well, how can we increase our reach? And they done that with Salesforce. And that's way smarter. So they have founded a venture with data.com. So directly from Salesforce, a CRM system, you now have the chance to check with data.com, Dun & Bradstreet, if the client that you have in your CRM is trustworthy, if they paid the last invoices. So it's well more integrated, and for Dun & Bradstreet, it's way easier because it's directly built into the Salesforce application. And they don't have to worry about all the clients that have an existing relation with Salesforce. And this is increasing the scale massively. And you don't have to worry about it too much. You do one-time integration, and it's built into all the Salesforce clients out of the box. If you do a step back from the technology, what this means is that APIs are not longer only a technology thing. These APIs have a massive impact on both sides. They have an impact on how the applications are wired up, how the processes are working, and there is cross-process integration and connection. And that also means that it becomes increasingly difficult to manage those APIs because there is an impact. For example, if you try to purchase a big TV screen, the value of that TV screen is probably around 500 euros, even more if you buy a huge UHD screen. It's around 1,000 probably. So if you go online and try to shop it, there is multiple parties involved. It's not only the platform provider who has the online shop, which is very likely Amazon these days. There is probably a provider that sells on top of Amazon. So Amazon is just a service. Then you have all the shipping agencies. So they try to detect which is the best shipping agency to get the TV screen to your place as fast as possible. And probably that's a robot in future or a drone or whatever. Hopefully the drone is not going to smash it on the way to your home. Then you have the payments. I mean, you can basically select these days between at least 3 or 4 different payment methods. I mean, imagine how that was 5 years ago. In Germany, we have a big mail order company out of my hometown. You had to fill in the paper forms, send it there, and there was no option. The stuff arrived when it arrived. There was one payment method. They had your account number, and they charged the account. That's it. Today, you have PayPal, you have PayDirect, you have payment interfaces from the bank, probably. So there is a multitude of options also for the clients. And that's also the pressure that the providers or the sellers or the shop providers have these days, because the customers say, why can't I use this or that service? That's my preferred service. I would like to use it. So you see that APIs kind of, the technology goes a little bit in the background from the consumer perspective. But again, it still exists. It enables all that. And this pressure is basically raising a problem for the providers, because they need the developers, they need the development power. And if you expose an API, the developers want easy access to APIs. They want it in an understandable manner. They want an SDK. And all that stuff, basically, you quickly realize APIs become products. You kind of need to do some marketing, you need to promote it, you need to build a team that does some support and help, you need to document them the right way, you introduce a lifecycle management, what if you change it, how do you deprecate stuff? It's complicated, or it sounds complicated. And then there is a variety of internal technical problems that I introduced. How do I integrate that with my existing systems? What are the visibility requirements that I have? Because I would like to see who's using what and when. Security is a massive issue. Control, and at the same time it has to be faster and cheaper and monetized in the end, because nobody's building up an API platform for €0 in the end. There is always the question, okay, how much do we get? How much more do we get? And there is basically what we call digital dilemma introduced between the new side of things, the digital teams who would like to build up something very quickly with speed, simplicity, and ease of use. And then you have the internal teams who kind of come with all the legacy and regulation from the back. Sounds like a lot of work. In fact, it is. And the good thing is that you signed up for a conference where you get some advice, at least. I don't claim for me that I have all the good stuff in these slides, but at least you are aware that those things exist, and I encourage you to continue working on it. So what can you do to kind of get some fire to your APIs? What do enterprises do these days to get some fire? They do hackathons. That's one of the effects that you see with APIs, hackathons. So what is a hackathon? You try to get all the crazy guys who are sitting in front of the keyboard, lock them in one room, you feed them with pizza, and you give them some APIs. And then probably they create something great and being innovative. There is a principle around hackathons. Usually you try to build up a theme or a specific topic. You limit the time when they should develop something, usually 24 hours or 2 days. There is a jury around, very often equipped by C-level people. There is huge prizes. I'm going to have an example with huge prizes right after. The location, food, drink supplied, special tracks, so you kind of evangelize a little bit what your API can provide, how you can best implement it, and those things, and you try to facilitate it. So what can providers take away from hackathons? So if you think about, well, we have a cool API, we would like to facilitate it, promote it? What can we take away? Ideas and innovation, obviously, that's the first thing. Partnerships with startups, that's also an interesting thing. We see increasingly that entire teams sign up for hackathons, also in the banking world. Because in the banking world, there is a specific example of startups trying to sell their property to the huge banks. And then contact to developers. Actually, I had one client who was talking to me saying, well, the number one topic for us is we would like to recruit employees. And the hackathon is a good way because we have all the smart people in the room and we can judge very quickly which are the smartest guys. I said, okay, that's interesting. You do an entire hackathon just for that. Not too bad. And in the end, yes, technical experience and feedback. You can learn how your system behaves, not only in, let's say, lab situations with your continuous testing and all that stuff. You kind of can analyze how it behaves in overload situation or in unusual ways, because the people are obviously starting to do something new that you have not tried before. So you probably see unusual implementation, probably abuse, misuse, however you want to call it. And that's interesting to learn and adapt your system to it, because that's the reality. Once you turn it out, you will have a lot of visitors who are going to try to smash it. And then you get a lot of direct feedback in terms of improvement. It doesn't matter if it's the SDK, if it's the documentation or the API content itself. You get a lot of direct feedback, and that's, you can talk to people. It's not a feedback form or forum or tweet. You have people sitting in front of you being able to explain why that is an issue and why that is missing. So that it's a huge opportunity, and it's a lot different, the person-to-person contact versus doing it via internet. So one of the effects that we see in the banking industry is PSD2. I don't know, are you familiar with PSD2? So we in Germany had these nice little account numbers on our banking accounts. Now we have the numbers nobody can remember anymore. It's like the huge things. I always have to pull out my card and put inside, huge probability of mistakes. And the European Union tries to deregulate the payment market, and they do that with PSD2. The account number is one of the effects. But the other effect is that they are opening up the payment market. So the financial industry has done a very good job in trying to isolate the market. And now the European Union is going into the market, trying to deregulate it, open it up for new players. And that's also for the payment services, as also for the account information services. So this is what we have today for most of the stuff. So you are the customer, you have your mobile app and you have a bank account. And in future, they are obliged to expose the data to other providers too. And they cannot say, oh, no, we don't do that. You have to go to a service provider XYZ. They are legally obliged to do that. And that's by the year 2018. So it raises a huge concern for them. So banks are starting to leverage hackathons to kind of explore and learn the topic, trying to get the first experience with APIs. Not all of them, but we are seeing a trend towards it, and UniCredit is one of them. They have run a hackathon last year in 3 locations, this year in 1 location at least. And also the insurance industry. There is an Insure hack in Cologne, which we are also sponsoring. These guys have ridiculous amount of prices. The number one price here is 50K euro for an innovation that you built in 24, 48 hours. I mean, that's amazing. Yeah, that's amazing opportunity for developers, but it shows also the pressure that they have. So if you have APIs, if you don't have, then get APIs done. I wish you happy innovating and code strong, as we say. So probably you can get something done very quickly and very good. And I would like to say thank you, and I hope you enjoy the rest of the conference here. I'm around with the other guys, and we do a Q&A session, I learned, at the end of this track.
Correct.
Thank you.
Thank you, Philipp.